Hello and welcome. So recently I came across this really cool tool. It's called Context Hub. And in this lab, we're going to see how we can explore, how we can use Context Hub and integrate it with our AI agents. So Context Hub is a CLI tool that gives our AI agents on-demand access to curated version documentation, right? So if you've been coding with AI agents for a while, you probably know that the AI agents, they have a cutoff date for their training data. Between the end of the training data and today, there has been changes, or there are changes to the packages and libraries we use as developers. Basically, new versions are released, updates to the APIs or interfaces are made, and we actually end up with AI sometimes generating outdated code that doesn't really work with the latest versions of the packages and libraries we are using. Context Hub comes in to fill in this gap. So basically, instead of actually having AI using its built-in knowledge, or basically the knowledge that it was trained on, the data that it was trained on, Context Hub acts as a way to retrieve relevant information and up-to-date information to add that to the context of our AI agents. This is the link to the repository. I do expect this tool to evolve quite quickly because, well, it's a fairly recent tool, and I do expect the content here explicitly or specifically to increase over time, right? You can see here there are many tools that are packages and libraries that maybe you identify as being used in your project, and I do expect this to grow over time. And I would not be surprised as well if eventually Context Hub also allows us to configure external sources for maybe some internal documentation portals and so on and so forth. So the cool thing here is that, well, Context Hub provides this information in a sort of a large language model optimized format, instead of having the large language model fetch this information from the web and then get a lot of noisy, dirty, sometimes missing or broken data. So it's nice to have, it's a very cool tool to have and very easy to integrate with your AI agents. That's what we're going to do in this lab. Really cool stuff coming up. So let's take a short break and come back in the next lecture to start with our implementation. Hello and welcome. I'm going to start tackling here. We're going to start working with Context Hub. So I do provide a contexthub.zip file in the resources of this lab. You can just download this file and then just unzip the contents, right? The moment you unzip the contents here, there will be a few things that will come up. First of all, the Context Hub folder. And then within this folder, you're going to find the lab.markdown file. This is really the description of the lab here. And as always, that contains the lab environment setup instructions, setup steps here to install the Context Hub CLI. Also how to update, how to browse a little bit or explore the CLI here, running a couple of commands. And then activity 2 here, we're going to wire up our AI agent. We will add it as the MCP server here for Claude Desktop or Claude Code, however you want to use this. And then we're going to test Context Hub. We have one query here. You can definitely use more. This is one related here to Prisma, which is the tool that we're going to focus on here in this lab. But as already mentioned, Context Hub has the documentation for lots of packages and libraries, and this grows by the day. So you can just have a look here, browse over the available documentation in Context Hub here. So you can just search Context Hub and have a look at what is available. And you can also come up with your own query here. In activity 3, we're going to then move on to letting our AI agent fix the bug for ourselves, right? So we're going to use our AI agent to diagnose and fix the broken query in our code. That's great. So that's it for the overview of this lab here. I would also invite you to give it a try on your own to go through the instructions. Let me just show you quickly here the starter code, right? So if we have a look inside of this folder here, we will have Prisma, source, and tests. And this here is just the configuration for Prisma. And then we have within our source here, we have the database that's going to create a new Prisma client. And we then have a demo JavaScript folder here. What this project is basically doing is it's just running a query here to return the users who have published posts created after the specified date here. This implementation is intentionally wrong. So this is kind of, there are a couple of bugs here, and we could probably start looking at it, but it basically basically we would need to be very familiar with Prisma to actually understand what is going on here. If you're not familiar with Prisma and you still want to fix that and you don't want to go to the documentation and maybe your AI agent has a little bit of an outdated information, it might not be as straightforward or as quick. So we're going to see how effective using Context Hub is. We have a couple of tests here, and basically some of these tests, they fail on purpose here, because we can then use them to provide feedback to our AI agent. So that's it for the overview. As always, I would invite you to try to go through this lab on your own before watching the solution recordings. With that being said, let's take a short break and we're going to come back in the next lecture to start going through this lab together. Hello and welcome. Let's now start implementing our lab here. We're going to be using Claude Code here. So if you're also using Claude Code, then you do need to have a subscription, right? So I would assume if you're already using that, you have a subscription. But if you're working with any other AI agents and then you want to also do this lab using your own AI agent, then that's perfectly fine. You would just need to make sure that where we have here instructions for Claude Code, you just use the commands that are compatible with your agent. All right, so let's have a look at the lab environment setup. I'm just going to jump right into the lab environment setup because I'm going to assume here that we do have Node installed, so Node version. That's for me 24, and we have npm version here. That's going to be 11.5.1 for me. Anything that's recent here should work. Just make sure that you don't have like npm 6 or something like this, or Node 14 or whatever. But as long as you get a fairly recent, let's say 20 plus and maybe 9 plus, I think that would also be fine, right? I added here, 18.x or later, 9.x or later. So that should be fine. Now, we do need to have the Context Hub CLI, but I do have the commands for us to install it here. If you've seen my other videos, you normally know that I do like to pin this version specifically here for us to have maximum compatibility. But let's be honest, this is not the best approach here, right? I do expect that Context Hub or chub here, or chub, how do you pronounce it? I don't know, you can choose. I do expect that this will actually evolve quite quickly. So I do think that you need to update this fairly often to get the best features. It might also be the case that some of the commands are going to change here and they're not going to be 100% compatible with what we are doing. But I do believe that the core premise here will remain the same of Context Hub. And then it should be fairly straightforward also to find the matching command in case the API changes. That's just in case. So I'm not going to pin a version here. That's on purpose. I would like you to install the latest version available for you. And that's going to be what I'm going to do here. I will install the latest version, and then this basically gives me access to the chub or chub CLI. I'm going to call it chub because I find it's nicer. So let's just go with the chub CLI. Basically here, when we run chub update, this is going to update the registries. I do believe that there is a help command that we can use as well. And yes, this update here is used to refresh the cached registry index, right? So this is also very good here for us to make sure that we have the latest documentation. And then we can also set up our npm project. So we're going to change into the starter folder. We're going to run npm install, or actually maybe npm CI would be better because we do have a package log file here. And of course, I'm in the wrong directory, right? So that's pretty bad. Let's change the Context Hub and now starter like so. And then I should be able to run npm CI. I'm going to fix this already to be npm CI instead of npm install here because we do have the package log file. When you have a look at this lab, you're going to get the updated version. All right, so now that we have it here, let's run npm run db setup. Laura, what does this do? This is going to run the script that is here in our db setup in our package.json file. And this here does not ship with a .env file. So let me just quickly add these steps here as well. We're going to say cp.env.example, and we're going to copy that to .env like so. And this should be enough, right? So I'm just going to run these two commands here. Let's execute that, and perfect. Now it is executing. Now it's generating everything. All right, so minor things that probably I did just forget to add. I apologize for that, but hopefully when you get this lab here, it's going to be the updated version. Also nice to get a little bit of error handling, right? Or debugging here. Perfect. So now that we have things set up, let's run an npm test, and bingo, tests are failing here. We do have some problems. Our query is not working. That's on purpose, right? Lauro, I'm still not very familiar with this project structure. Actually, this might be a good example here, or a good exercise for us to use our AI companion. So I'm just going to start here with Claude, and basically this is going to start the Claude code interactive agent here. And I'm just going to add a short prompt here. Please give me an overview of the code base, and what it does. Right, so that's all that we can do here. And then this should actually read a couple of files. It should ask for some permission here, and it should also give a fair explanation of what is going on within the code base. So as you can see, if we scroll up a little bit more, we're going to get here what this does. Basically, it just queries a SQLite database to find active users, and the tech stack that it's using, the data model that it uses for users, posts, and so on, the structure of the project, as well as the bug, and also already here a proposed solution, right? So this is also pretty good here, and it's a pretty good overview of our project. So I'm going to exit from Cloud Code, and let's now explore the CLI, and our next step is to explore the CLI from Chub or Hub. But before we do that, let's take a short break, and we're going to come back in the next lecture to continue with this lab. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we're going to go through the Chub CLI, get comfortable with it before really involving an AI agent. I do always like to understand what is going on the tools that I'm using, just so that I make sure that what I'm giving to the agent, I'm actually aware of what I'm giving, which kind of permissions, which kind of information, and so on and so forth. So let's start by searching for the Prisma documentation. We know that our Prisma query is wrong here. It is basically broken. So the first thing we can run is chub search Prisma. This is going to look here for the Prisma documentation. It's going to give us actually the correct name. That is actually the name that we need to use when we want to get this documentation. You will also see that there are two versions here, one for JavaScript and one for Python. And if you do want to know all the available documentations here, then you can just run chub without the specific search term here, right? So you see 20 results. We can actually use here --help to see which kind of options we have available. So we have here the --limit. If we were to run here search --limit with 100, for example, then this is going to actually give all the entries, right? There are 84 entries at this point in time. Once again, I do expect this to grow, and will also be different when you watch the recording. So now that we know that we're interested in Prisma ORM and in the language JavaScript, then we can just run this query here. And this is actually going to give you all the contents of the documentation, right? So you see here, there are quite a few examples, actually, primarily examples here, but you might also find some documentation, some important information regarding the interfaces, or for example, here some example dummy code, common error codes, and so on and so forth. So this really depends on the library you're exploring. And if there is any library that you're interested in, then you could probably already search for it here and see whether there is documentation available. That's great. So now we can go to step 3 here. If you want to open the users.javascript file and have a look over this based on also the documentation that we fetched via chub, you can do that and maybe give it a try here, what is broken and what could be a potential fix. Right, so that's pretty much it. Actually, if you want to run chub or chub help like so, you will get an idea of all the commands. I do apologize here, that's not very readable, so maybe now it's a little bit better. You get update, you get cache, you get search, get, build, feedback, and annotate, and you can play around with the CLI as well. All right, that's it. So that's basically it for our initial exploration of the CLI. To be fully honest, I don't think that this tool is made primarily for humans. I think that's made primarily for large language models and AI agents. So I wouldn't spend too much time trying to get the information ourselves here. The real value comes when we wire this tool to our AI agent, and that's what we're going to do in the next lecture. But before that, let's take a short break, and I'll see you in the next video. activity. Hello and welcome. Let's now move on to the next activity where we'll wire up Context Hub with our AI agent. Now here really depends on the AI agent that you are using. I'm going to be working with Claude Code here, and Claude Code has a CLI tool that will help me add this MCP server here just by running MCP add context hub and then -- chub MCP. Now chub -MCP here, it is a command that is built into the chub or chub CLI, and this will basically just start the MCP server, right? So as you can see here, the server is running now just by running this. So the only command that needs to be run when starting the MCP server is chub -MCP. I'm going to stop that, and then I'm just going to run here Claude MCP add context hub like so, and this will add the context hub MCP server to my Claude Code setup. We will now move on to installing the skill in our Claude installation here. We can actually install it globally so that it applies to all our projects. So I'm going to start by creating a new directory here. This will also create any parent directory in case it's not available. That's going to be .claude/skills like so. And now here we'll see that we can actually cat the contents of the skill, right? So if we were to say here cat and then just run this command, you will see that these are the contents of the skill. Now here I am adding this skill globally because I do find it's a valuable skill, so I'm just going to add this globally here to my Claude installation so that all the further sessions of Claude have access to this skill. If you do want to install it locally in your starter directory or whatever project you're working on, then just when you create here your folder and when you copy the file, then just make sure to use here just a relative path, right? Here I am creating under my home directory, and this will mean that the skill is installed globally. We can now verify the setup. So let's now run this query here. We're going to start with Claude like so, and then I'm just going to run the query and let's see what this will do. Perfect. So as you can see here, it is already prompting us to use the Context Hub MCP server. It wants to use the search command with the following query here, Prisma relation filter sum every. We're going to say here yes and don't ask again, or actually I'm going to say yes and don't ask again for Context Hub. If you want to just approve it once, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to approve it for all the future usages of the Context Hub MCP server. Or to be a little bit more precise for that specific operation, right? The chub search. Now we have the chub get here, or chub get. We're going to then accept all these operations here, and now we get some output back, right? So this is really cool because it's actually looking at the latest documentation available in Context Hub, and it's giving us a fair overview here regarding the differences between some and every. It's also highlighting a key edge case here that is actually pretty much the root cause of our error, that whenever we use the every filter here, a user that has no posts or 0 posts will be included, since the condition will basically evaluate to true when there are no records. That's great. So we can confirm that our agent has access to the Context Hub MCP server, and it's able to interact with that to retrieve up-to-date information on the library we are working with. That's really cool, and we're basically wrapped, or we concluded now the activity 2. We can move on to activity 3. But before that, let's take a short break, and we're going to come back in the next lecture to continue with this lab. Hello and welcome. Let's now tackle activity 3. Let's let the agent fix the bug for us. We do have an understanding of what's going on here, but we would like to actually have the agent fix it for us. Now, you can just prompt the agent to fix the issue and let it do its thing. I do find that because we have tests that are failing here, we can start by prompting the agent to tell, hey, run the tests in the project, use the failures to identify what's broken, and then use Context Hub to fetch relevant docs before diagnosing the root cause. I do like to always add a step here to ask for my confirmation after proposing a specific fix. Now, this is a small fix here. Maybe in a bigger project, we would like to do a few more things. But I do find that asking the agent actively here to pause and ask for feedback or confirmation information, at least that, and actually especially at the beginning of the interaction is very good because it gives you the chance to steer the agent in the right direction. If you just tell it to do its thing and you forget about it, it might be the case you come back a couple of minutes or hours later and you have something that works, but it's completely off what you had in mind. So to get the chance to steer the behavior of the agent at the beginning, it's a great thing. And then as you steer it towards a correct direction according to what you have in mind, you can then speed it up by saying, all right, now you can move forward without asking for my feedback. Just a tip here that I did find quite useful in a couple of projects I'm running with, and it might be useful to you as well. So let's just run this prompt here and we're going to let the agent now do its thing. I'm going to come back in a couple of minutes once it's done here generating the proposal for the fix. Great, so it did provide here an overview what the problems are. It says there are 2 bugs, and then it goes here through what is bug 1, average should be sum in the where clause. Then bug 2 here include posts, true is going to load all posts, not the filtered or not just the filtered ones. And then it has a third bug here, which is also fair, but apparently didn't count correctly, right? So just has 2 bugs. Actually, there are 3 bugs. So it proposes here the changes, basically says to order by changes here posts, and then it's going to actually provide only the published posts that are actually created after the date provided here and under the since argument, and then it changed every to some here under the posts filter. So this is looking pretty good. Shall I apply this? Yes, please go ahead. And the agent should be able to fix that. We can also see here, if you have a look at the document, or not the documentation, but the previous thoughts of the agent, basically actually called Context Hub to fetch Prisma docs. It says I already have the Prisma Context Hub docs from the previous fetch. So that's pretty good. We don't need to make an extra call, right? It identified both bugs and it explained why each change is needed. And here, if the agent had tried to answer from memory from the first try, I would push it back. But since it did actually fetch the jobs here in the previous iteration, I'm happy with this, right? So we can just move on here because this is the same conversation and it already has these docs here in its memory, in the context of the conversation. All right, so it did provide here the fix and we can allow edits. I'm just going to allow all edits during this session here. And here are the edits that it's going to make. That's great. So now I'll also run npm test here with the agent. As you can see, it is running npm tests to now get feedback whether the tests were fixed. And perfect. We could also run this manually here, but the agent can confirm that all the 4 tests are passing. Now here, Chub has another cool feature, which is an annotation. Now the annotation here is something that allows us to add local notes here to the documentation based on what we are interacting with it here. So we can ask for our agent to save a new annotation on the documentation with a concise note about the issue that it has identified, right? So in our code here. Let's now have a look at what it will do. And perfect, yes, there is a chub annotate function here in our MCP server. This is what it wants to do. It wants to create here under the Prisma ORM the following note. This is looking pretty good to me, so I'm just going to allow this kind of annotation to be saved, and this is looking pretty good. Now here we can verify that the note was saved. I'm going to exit from Claude Code here, and I'm just going to run the chub CLI annotate like so, and then the help command. Just have a look at what we have. We can actually list all the annotations here. So we're going to say -- list like so. Oops, sorry. That would be list like so. And then you will see that the annotation is under the Prisma ORM here. Let's then run this chub annotate and then Prisma ORM like so, and it's just gonna show all the annotations. Amazing. So congratulations on completing this lab. You also now have a very powerful tool that your agents can use to fetch up-to-date documentation when working in your code base. Hopefully you enjoyed this lab, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.